everyone.
Hey, Brian. Well, maybe we'll give everyone another minute or two. Gail, I was just commenting that it's weird only knowing people through virtual meetings and never really meeting in person. And you're one of those people for me.
Yep. Well, hopefully we get to meet in person soon, Dole.
I've had my second vaccine shot, so maybe I'll be good here a little bit.
Yeah, I've been vaccinated for about a month too, so I'm ready.
Boy, that second shot though, I was like not feeling good for a good 6 or 7 hours that next morning.
I have my next one or my second one next week, so I'm not looking forward to that. I keep hearing that, so it's not perfect.
Tylenol like 30 minutes before your vaccine, and then every 6 hours for the first 2 days, and it will help tremendously.
What did you say? Do what?
Take Tylenol just before you go in, and then take Tylenol every 6 hours those first 2 days, and it will help you tremendously.
Good to know. Thank you.
Catherine, I did not do that, just so you know, and that may have been why Gail's like, oh, it didn't bother me at all, and it bothered me, so.
Now, in all fairness, I had chills and some body aches that second day from basically from the time I got up until like 7, 8 o'clock that night, but I was able to work. I just worked from home that day. I actually got more done than I had in the office. So.
Not me. I was laid up in bed feeling awful, like Cameron in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Okay, Jessica, should we get this meeting called to order?
Sure, let's do it. So you definitely have your quorum, so you can go ahead and call it to order. We'll call it, what, 1:32?
Yep.
Okay.
If you'd like to do our roster, I'm sure you're already checking that.
Yep, so I'm gonna go down the line here, just everybody's first name real quick, to let you know that I have seen you, and then at the end, if I did not catch you, let me know. Kathleen, I've seen Kathleen, Wendy, Lachelle, Matt, that's everyone from CDOT I've seen. Tim and Gail from Colorado Springs, Brian from Mountain Metro, Victoria from El Paso, Brandy, Dole, Debbie from Monument, Darren from Schriever, Jason, Palmer Lake, Sally, PPACG staff. Is there any members that I missed here? No? Okay, so with that, just remember to state your name when you make a motion. That way it's easy to record. We can go back and review if need be. And make sure to mute yourself if you're not speaking, just to cut back on the background noise. That helps us out there too. With that, I turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. It looks like we have, was someone trying to say something?
Yes, this is Debbie Flynn with the Town of Monument. I just wanted to give a quick update that Larry Manning has retired and is no longer working with the Town of Monument. And we have the job description posted on our website. Just wanted to give everyone a heads up about that. Mike Foreman, our town manager, is filling in the meantime. So if there's any issues or concerns that you need the planning director or town manager to work with, please let me know.
Thank you, Debbie. Thanks for the update. And Jessica, I should remember this, but does the agenda need to get an action item on approving the agenda? Okay.
Yes, yes, I can pull that up now. I'll share screen so that way everyone can see it.
This is Brian. I'll move approval of the agenda.
I'll second that. Tim Roberts.
Thank you. There's a second on the floor. Any other discussion on the agenda? Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda as posted, say aye or wave your hand so Jessica can see you.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes, agenda is approved. And it is, I think, a lengthy agenda, so let's get started. Are there any public comments? I know we already have one identified. Is there anything else that anyone would like to, that has an item not on the agenda besides our gentleman from Department of Health? Okay. I think I saw, Richard, is that your task there?
Yep, that's me.
Well, if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then it's all yours.
Sure, I'm Rick Coffin. I'm a planner with the Air Pollution Control Division at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And I'm here today to talk about a regulatory proposal that the state is working on called the Employee Traffic Reduction Program, or I'll refer to it as ETRIP. And I want to thank the PPACG staff for getting me on the agenda quickly. So at first, this was being considered as a statewide rule, but just in the past few weeks, a decision came down that it will only focus on the Denver Metro North Front Range ozone non-attainment area. So like there was a rush to get this in front of you as soon as possible at the time, but now since it's only focusing on Denver and the North Front Range, there's not as big of a rush. But I also wanted to kind of go through very quickly what this looks like, and also talk about if there's any interest in PPACG leading efforts for a voluntary program in the Springs area. And hopefully, I'll try to go through this very quickly, and hopefully maybe I can come back in the future and when there's more time on the agenda. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to run through this pretty fast. So transportation is a significant source of ozone precursor, which are NOx and VOCs along the Front Range, and that's primarily a concern in the Denver area because of their failure to meet federal ozone standards. But it's also, I think it's also a concern in Colorado Springs because I'll show this on a later slide, but the Springs area, it's obviously growing, and the ozone levels in the area have been close to the federal standard levels. They're going down overall, but they're close. And transportation, I have a breakdown of emissions as well in one of the later slides. So basically the Regional Air Quality Council, which is the lead planning organization in Denver, has worked with stakeholders to put together an ETRIP framework over the last year. So next slide. That's a map of the area, non-attainment area. Next slide, please. And then transportation is also a source of greenhouse gases in the state. And I just wanted to highlight that, passenger vehicles and light-duty vehicles make up a significant portion of greenhouse gas emissions, and that's a statewide figure we have right here. We don't have it broken out by region. And next slide. And the state is on basically on a path to try to achieve great greenhouse gas reductions, as you can see in this slide. And ETRIP is a strategy that's been identified in the state's greenhouse gas roadmap as a near-term solution. And that's why we're pursuing it. So next slide. And we've held a bunch of stakeholder meetings, and it's set to go before our commission for the actual rulemaking in August. Next slide. Okay, so basically an overview of what would this actually be. It would require that large employers And the definition or the applicability we're using is employers that have 100 or more employees. They would have to put together a plan to try to achieve a goal to reduce the number of single occupant vehicle trips by employees to and from work. So basically, reduce the number of trips that a person is driving alone by themselves in the vehicle to and from work. Next slide, please. And you know, this slide, we've received a lot of questions about this. You know, it's not a ban on commuting. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Each company can put together a plan that meets their needs, and yeah, and can be flexible. And I think, you know, if we talk about doing a voluntary program in Colorado Springs, it could be especially, you know, flexible, and it could be an interesting kind of like pilot project. Next slide. So basically, a company would have a point person to develop the plan, and surveys would have to be conducted to gain information about how employees get to and from work. And that will also help companies see which types of strategies can help reduce those commutes to and from work. Next slide. So these are some of the most common strategies: telecommuting, like flex schedules or compressed work schedules, providing transit benefits or subsidies, ride sharing, employee shuttles, parking management, bike commuting services. Next slide. And then it's this slide goes over strategies for non-office type settings. So we found that some very successful examples of programs in other states are actually like in rural areas that maybe aren't obvious examples of programs like this, but they do work. So next slide. And I think I'm getting low on time, so I'm going to skip this. If you could go to the next slide. And then the next slide, that's just examples of success stories. And then in addition to reducing traffic congestion and emissions from driving, E-Trip can also provide benefits such as reduced overhead costs. And basically, like the benefits for employers, you know, sometimes there's costs associated with parking management, yeah, and enhanced employee recruitment and retention. It's seen as, you know, being an employer of choice if you offer like flex schedules and transit subsidies and, you know, compressed work schedules. So there can be a better work personal life balance when these types of programs are offered. Next slide. And then I think you probably are all familiar with this. I grabbed some of this info from PPACG documents, but you know, obviously population has increased quite a bit over the last couple decades, and it's projected to increase by almost 45% over the next 30 years. That's from the State Demography Office. And then congestion has increased, you know, over the last decade. And then I grabbed some traffic count numbers from CDOT's online data system. So basically between 2015 and 2019, it increased 20%. And these are just continuous count stations. So they don't, you know, they're in certain areas throughout the springs, and I just grabbed what was available, you know, for those years. And as you can see, obviously it declined due to COVID. And I think on any given day now, there's still about a 10% decline in counts when compared to pre-COVID numbers. But you know, these types of programs can maybe help us keep counts down a little bit. Yeah, just by making these better planning management decisions. And then I also wanted to highlight that, you know, there's certain goals and objectives in the PPACG long range plan, moving forward 2045 plan, and the ozone advanced plan that the Air Quality Technical Committee put forth. And it really lines up with some of the goals that and objectives and overall like tone that was found in those plans. So how am I doing on time now? Am I at there at that point?
I think you're okay. I think this is pretty,
Okay.
Yeah, keep going. Thanks for asking.
Okay, I'm getting close to the end. So next slide. So I just wanted to highlight, these are the ozone trends for the area. So there's a couple monitors down in your in the Springs area, and that dotted line there is the standard, and the plotted blue and red lines are the monitor levels. And you can see that over time it's actually going down, which is the same thing we've seen in Denver, but it's just not going down close enough. And the high levels that we had recently are a result of wildfire events, and it's likely that those won't be considered in your area's data. But even without the wildfire considerations, the area's been pretty close to the standard. So anything that we can do to try to stay in attainment is really preferable, because once an area goes into non-attainment, there's additional like permitting that has to happen for different types of businesses in the area, and some emissions inventory work has to happen. And it could be a long road once you're in non-attainment to get out of it. Like we're talking decades out, like 20, 30 years of work. So next slide, please. Did I thought there was another, maybe, can you go back? Yeah, okay, we skipped over that one. So I just wanted to show this, and sorry, the colors aren't the best in this color scheme, but the highway vehicles, that's the brighter orange color. And you can see, so we're more interested in NOx and VOCs because they're ozone precursors here. But you can see for NOx, the highway vehicles makes up a significant portion, and off-highway as well. And then for VOCs, it's not the largest source, but looks like it's the second largest source. So I think as our utility sector gets cleaner, transportation might, be seen as the biggest chunk of the pie. So, yeah, so I think it's definitely a hard thing it's a hard nut to crack, but I think it's going to take lots of different strategies to get reductions down over time. So next slide. Next one. So these bullets, the top bullets are in regard to the regulatory proposal for the Denver area. So if anyone is interested, you're welcome to attend any of our stakeholder meetings, and the link is there. And we welcome all comments, even if you're outside the Denver area, but everyone's welcome to participate. And then I really hope that we can continue discussions on voluntary efforts. I know we do have a meeting scheduled with folks from CDOT and some of the transportation planners in the Denver area. And I know that John from PPACG is invited to that meeting, and the CDOT folks are going to be talking about potential funding for these efforts, including for PPACG. So I'm hopeful on on that front. But yeah, I guess I'd just like to plant seeds and see if anyone has any questions. And yeah, if I'd be more than, you know, happy to come back and, you know, we could talk a little bit more in the future when there's more time, if there's interest.
Are there any questions for Rick?
Yeah, this is Tim Roberts with the City of Colorado Springs. In the 2000s, back when PPACG was a non-attainment, there was a Garden of the Gods TMA, which implemented, you know, their goal was a lot of what you were implementing, a lot of what you were showing on this presentation. Are you guys looking at only like volunteers for like a whole city or whole entity like that, or are you guys also looking at corridors? Because that was like one corridor in the city of Colorado Springs as far as volunteering.
Yeah, that's a good question, Tim. And I think, you know, I think right now, like, everything's on the table, since, you know, I guess I would like to hear from the group and from the, you know, PPACG members and planners in the region, you know, what would make most sense for the area. But since it's voluntary, you know, I think we can make it up as we go along. And I think we would be able to use some of the resources that are developed by the Denver area TMAs, and kind of easily take those and kind of edit them and craft them for use in the Colorado Springs area. But I don't think we've gone as far to say like this is for the specific city or entities or just the corridor. So yeah, that's a good question though, but TBD.
Hey, Dole, this is Brian. I have a couple comments. So thanks for coming down, Richard, and presenting this. And I guess I'd just like to take a moment to let those who don't know, but also to let you know that, you know, we do have a voluntary travel demand management travel reduction program here in the Pikes Peak region. And we have had one for a couple decades now. You know, it's under the City of Colorado Springs and Mountain Metropolitan Transit, which is where I work. We administer that program, and it's called the Metro Rides program. So it involves, you know, van pool, carpool, school pool, bicycling encouragement. And, you know, that is something that we've been lucky enough to get funding for over these past several decades. And, you know, just going back to the last time things were normal in 2019, you know, we had about 26 vans operating from Colorado Springs to Denver Tech Center, Pueblo. You know, there were about 140 participants. We operated, you know, kind of a mix of 8 and 12 passenger vans. And, you know, that the employees were matched based on their work schedules and their origin and destination. And through the van pool program in 2019, we estimated that there was a reduction of a little over 1.1 million miles of vehicles mile traveled, which equates to a reduction of about 235 tons of carbon monoxide. We do have, as I mentioned, our school pool and carpool programs, and they're mostly self-administered or self-governing. We provide the software through a website where individuals can find those matches and do school pools and carpools. Our bicycling encouragement, you know, we have bicycle lockers at three park and rides. We have about 12 lockers at the Woodman Park and Ride, 10 at the Tejon Park and Ride, and 12 at our city administration building in downtown Colorado Springs. And you know, all of our transit vehicles are outfitted with bicycle racks that can carry 2 bicycles. And we also we have a policy that allows individuals to bring their folding bicycles on board our vehicles. And also, Tim Roberts just asked that other question, through his division, the traffic engineering division, they are now kind of tasked with leading the Bike to Work Day events in Colorado Springs. And so that's something that us at Mountain Metro also actively support and participate in. We also have a bike valet program, which allows organizations, festivals, neighborhood parties or whatever to rent out, or, well, not to pay a fee, but to use our bicycle storage facilities, so people can ride their bikes to these festivals and parties and park their bikes securely. And we also have, we have a college pass program too that kind of fits into this travel demand management scheme also. And Colorado College, Pikes Peak Community College, and University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, they pay a student fee, and that allows their students to ride for free on our system during those semesters. So that's also instrumental in trying to keep vehicles off the road. So I just wanted to bring this up. This is something that we already have, and it's very effective. 2020 was kind of, these programs all took a big hit, and we are hopeful though, as the I-25 GAP project gets completed and that that managed lane opens up, that would be a great fit for additional van pools going, north and south, north to Denver, and continuing down to Pueblo. So be happy to answer any questions about that, or to keep you in the loop with how our program improves in the future.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I just want to say quickly, I knew you were doing some things, but I didn't know your program was that comprehensive. So that's really, really great to hear. And I'd like to follow up with you maybe separately to have a conversation, if that's all right.
Sounds good. Yeah, anything that we can do to show that this is something we're already doing, and to keep us, out of a mandate, that would be great.
Okay.
Hi, this is Victoria Chavez, El Paso County. Quick question for you, Rich. Thank you so much, first of all, for coming down and sharing your information with us. My question is, if God forbid the Pikes Peak area does go into non-attainment, will you just take the Denver requirements and put them into the Pikes Peak area, or would there be a separate rulemaking that would consider the Pikes Peak region?
Hey, Victoria, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. The actual regulatory proposal is still being developed, and it will be ready and out to the public, I think in the next week or two, but definitely before the end of this month. And that's where the draft language will be housed, including, how it will be written. Typically, these types of programs that aim to recruit vehicle miles traveled are only considered or only required under the federal non-attainment rules. For the more the more long-standing non-attainment areas, like Denver has been in non-attainment for so many years, and they're getting worse, and they fail to meet the standards. So they were recently redesignated as a quote serious area, and it looks like we might go to severe, which is even worse. And as you get bumped up, there's more and more requirements, and it's not until you're a serious area that this VMT offset, is what they call it, is required. So if Colorado Springs were, to be designated as non-attainment, it wouldn't happen overnight. First of all, we would see it coming, and we would have years to plan. because EPA moves pretty slowly with these things, and then we have so many years to develop a plan. And you would start off at the lowest tier of non-attainment, and that has the least requirements, and this wouldn't be one. But, you know, with that said, there are areas in other states that have this requirement, like based on their own choosing to do so. So I think it really comes down to what are the major sources of emissions in an area and what would work best to get the area back into attainment. And some work would have to be done to determine all that. So I guess that's a long way of saying I'm not sure, Victoria. Sorry, but more on that soon as the regulatory process carries on.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the answer. I know it's not a simple one and it's never going to be a yes or no, but I'm trying to gauge whether or not or how much to engage into the rulemaking process. So that gives me information, but it doesn't help me come to my own answer.
Yeah, and you know, in a previous meeting, you know, we did hear comments. You know, I think we still welcome comments from areas outside of Denver, because I think a comment like yours or a concern, I think that the commissioners who actually are the ones who adopt the rule, they like to hear from everyone. So if anyone here, you know, PPACG would like to develop comments and submit them, I think that is helpful for the overall process.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I mean, you guys know I'm a data geek, and I saw that chart, and I could spend a half an hour asking them questions about the data, but maybe we'll have to table that for another day.
This is Kathleen Collins from CDOT.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
One comment that Bill Haas of FHWA raised was that he sees it being very important that Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments be considered as a party to the rulemaking. And I don't know what process or procedures that would need to happen, but I wanted to just mention that John Leozatos wasn't at that particular meeting where it was raised, but I wanted to just bring that to the attention. So that's just something for folks to think about and look into further.
Thanks, Kathleen. I wonder, do you know if was Bill talking about this particular aspect of the rulemaking, or do you know if he was talking about the greenhouse gas standards?
He was talking, I'm sorry, I'll be clearer. It was not about this particular program. It was about the transportation rulemaking for greenhouse gas reductions. So yes, but since you were speaking, I thought I would let you hear that piece of it. So sorry, but thanks for letting me clarify.
Oh no, that's no need to apologize. There's a lot going on. And yeah, I'd be happy to, I could reach out to John separately after this and bring up that recommendation. I'd be happy to help point him in the direction to have it for filing for party status.
And John may already be aware, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? For the sake of time, I think we got to keep rolling. We got a pretty heavy agenda still ahead of us. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
All right,
Richard.
thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
See ya.
Okay, let's keep moving on down the schedule. We need to approve the minutes for those from the March 18th meeting.
It's Victoria. I'll move approval.
Do we have a second?
This is Brian. I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. Victoria. Any other comments about that? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from March 18th, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, it passes. Motion or the approval, the minutes for March 18th. Thank you. And then Catherine, are you going to give the Board of Directors report? I don't see John on the call yet.
Yes, John is not able to make it today, so he asked me to go ahead and take care of it. So our board meeting was actually yesterday, so it's an odd one that was the same week. Everyone said their farewells to Jill Gabler, the city councilwoman from Colorado Springs. That was her last board meeting because she will be moving off of the Colorado Springs Council and onto something else. So she'll no longer be on the PPACG board. They also approved amendment number 11 that you all recommended approval on for the STIP to reconcile piece with all that really long table of changes. They approved taking on DriveSmart. It's a nonprofit under PPACG. DriveSmart was going to close their doors, unfortunately, due to kind of COVID and just various funding issues. And so we were in talks for PPACG's in talks to kind of take them under our wing and create kind of a separate entity, but kind of under PPACG. So they're going to have their own board, but still partially boarded by our board as well. So you can feel free to ask more on that at either John or Jason O'Brien and Laura Cruz know a little bit more about that. And then finally, we just kind of I showed them the TIP draft from 22 through 25 and the UPW draft, and then also the TIP policies and procedures draft, all the things that you were proposing for you to kind of approve today. So that kind of sums it up.
Thank you, Catherine. Any questions for Catherine? Okay, let's keep moving on down to our action items. Looks like Will Mast, is he on the call? There you are.
Yes, I am. Hello.
Take it away.
All right, William Mast. I'm the GIS admin and modeling lead for PPACG. We have just initiated an update to some of the functional classifications of the roadways within the region. So we're bringing that to TAC because when reviewing a lot of the roads within the MPO and just focusing on some of the major corridors that we really strongly recommend for upgrade, it was about 246 odd segments, and with such a big recommendation, we wanted to bring that to TAC and just bring that to everybody's attention all at one shot. Jessica, are you running the slides?
I can go ahead and stop share if you would like to drive it yourself.
Or you can just scroll down because I think it's part of the tech packet.
Sure.
There we go. All right. And if you want to go down to the next one. So just as a quick review, the FHWA functional class system, we recognize that most jurisdictions probably have their own classification system that is used for design criteria within their jurisdictions. What we're talking about is the federal functional class system that is through the FHWA and then also through CDOT. And so it's a hierarchy of 7 classes, and like most functional classifications, it really is just designed to identify the role of each roadway within the overall network. With those 7 classes, there's expectations about the design, the speed, capacity, what kind of facilities it services. The big thing, I think for most jurisdictions, is that it is eligibility for federal funding if it's included in the federal system. And so we've got a number of roadways within the region that we've identified, again, specifically within the MPO, that are likely gonna, jurisdictions will probably wanna have eligible for federal funding just because of their capacity, the size, how they really function within the network. And so FHWA recommends that really every 10 years, along with the census, that the MPOs review this. So we just did the 2020 census, we're going through the MPO, and we've got a bunch of recommendations that we want to work with our member governments to make. You can move on to the next one, please. So just as a review, those 7 classes, interstate being number 1, we're obviously not making any recommendations there. But working down from that, we've got freeways and expressways, principal arterials, minor arterials, major and minor collectors. And then finally, the last one, number 7, is the local roads. anything that's a minor collector and above within an urban environment is going to be eligible for federal funding. This table actually gives you some examples really of how they function and examples of some of the roadways within Colorado. If you go on to the next slide. Within the rural areas, which we do have some rural areas within the MPO, anything that is a major collector and above is eligible for federal funding through programs like TIP. And again, we've got similar characteristics. What really changes between the urban and rural is the number or the percentage of overall collectors within the system is generally going to be higher than what you see in the rural, which might have more arterials. You can go on down to the next slide. So the design criteria we used was in alignment with the FHWA as well as the CDOT functional class manual. So we pulled both of those manuals and went through some of the criteria and evaluated some of the roads that are either federally classified, but we suggest moving down to a local just because of how they work in the network. And then quite a bit, most of the roads are going to be roads that are considered local, but we recommend be added to the federal functional class system as a collector or an arterial. We considered the traffic counts. If we didn't have counts, we used our model count. We consider the traffic generators. So if that road is servicing schools, businesses, parks, things of that nature, the speed limits, the physical characteristics, such as whether or not the access is signalized or controlled or uncontrolled. And then the role, if they're connecting obviously two arterials, that is the function of either another arterial or another collector. And again, working with the other physical characteristics, we distinguish if it was going to be a principal arterial or if it was a collector, a major or minor collector. Some of the advice and guidance that was provided by CDOT is in this table for the arterials. And if we go to the next slide, we have the table that we used for, again, sorting out some of the collectors. Moving on to the next slide, we have a similar table, but this is from the FHWA functional class manual. And what we focus on here is when we look at the overall network, the percentage of roads that are each class. Within the MPO, we're focusing really on the urban systems. And so we should see that the heavy arterials, the expressways and freeways should be about 0 to 2%. Principal arterials about 4 to 5% of the centerline mileage. Minor arterials should be about 7 to 12% over the overall mileage for a given jurisdiction with their urban network. And then moving on down to the next slide, please. We look at the collectors. A big change here would just be for the areas, mostly really in El Paso County, that are not considered urban, that's going to be in the rural system. And their percentage of collectors, major collectors, should be quite a bit higher than what we'd see in a rural environment. But for most of the jurisdictions within the MPO, we're looking at the mileage as an urban system, where you would expect the collectors to be about 7 to 13%, and then for the local roads making up everything else, which is typically about 67 to 76% of the overall network. If you can go down to the next slide, please. So 246 segments are within the MPO. We consider this kind of the low-hanging fruit. Most of these, like I said, are going to be local roadways, which serve as critical corridors in our modeling that we're going to recommend for really an upgrade into some functional class. Again, we use the FHWA criteria and CDOT guidance, and this isn't supposed to be exhaustive or really the end all. In fact, there's a lot of roadways that we look at that could probably also be included. And so we're willing to consider additional changes in another round of updates. When we looked at what we considered critical, or again, what we called maybe the low hanging fruit of kind of obvious updates, we figured 246 was a pretty good start. And so that kind of kicks the ball rolling. What we wanted to bring to TAC was an approval or really a motion to approve this process, not approve all 246 segments, not just blindly approve the recommendations that we have, but just the process to have jurisdictions review this and work with us to go ahead and then submit this to the FHWA for updates and changes to the functional class system, again, as each jurisdiction approves. Any questions? Not hearing
Dole,
any?
Tim Roberts here. Dole, Tim Roberts.
Hey,
Okay, Tim.
Okay, so how would this, so we already have a major thoroughfare plan, us, the county, and several other agencies. How would this relate to our approved locally adopted plans?
well, it's not likely going to change anything that's already in adopted plans. As you guys make updates to those plans, anything that you've got in there that references the functional classification would obviously need to be updated, but it doesn't change, I mean, the planning aspect of it. A good example, I mean, for example, like Union Boulevard, even Briargate Parkway. Right now, they're both local streets after the cross powers. They don't function as local streets. I think anybody that's familiar with the area up there on Northeast Colorado Springs would know that those aren't really local streets. So in order for them to be eligible for funding, we'd like to see those upgraded and put into a federal functional class. So those plans obviously have already considered the design criteria, the speed limits, and how they're actually functioning within your guys' network. This is just going to be updating it so that federally they're classified accordingly, probably how they should be. And Jessica, would you scroll down to the next slide, please? We do have an interactive map that we created of all of our changes. It's out on our PPACG kind of GIS hub. The link, again, is included in the TAC packet. And you can see all the road segments that we're recommending for change. Some of them we're not actually looking to add to the system or necessarily remove, just update roads that maybe are considered a minor collector that really should be a major collector, or a major collector that should be an arterial, or vice versa. But a good number of them are looking to try and add to the system.
So is there a reason why these would be different than, I guess I'm trying to grasp why, like on our thoroughfare plan, Briargate Parkway is the principal arterial east of Powers. Why would it be different, I guess?
Because nobody's actually submitted it to the FHWA. They don't actually change that classification.
And I'm sorry, Catherine, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I think it would be our goal to, you know, kind of keep the classifications across the different classification systems the same. But we do have to make sure we meet the criteria that's laid out by federal highway. But as much as we can, I'd say we can also make sure to align with what you have in your plans as well. So that, I mean, that could be another piece of this, is just making sure that those are consistent where possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think to Tim's point, we have, at least for Colorado Springs, because I know that they do have their own classification system, that was some of the criteria that we used for Colorado Springs roadways. So when you reference like Briargate Parkway being a principal arterial, that's how it is in the Springs system, which also includes some other classifications that aren't part of the FHWA guidance. But that's how they're doing it internally. And most jurisdictions that I've worked with have a similar setup. So we did use those internal designations to kind of help guide our recommendations. And again, what we're really talking about is just going to be what goes into the federal system. And the big thing for you guys is going to be considered eligibility for federal funding.
And Will, isn't that really the point of all of this? Is that really just reflects the additional growth and traffic on these roads? And now roads that in 2010 were not eligible for federal funding can now be eligible.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
A good example.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I guess I see little downside. I mean, what is any consequence of this upgraded system? I just don't see any downside. So I'm just curious.
I don't know that there's really a downside. There are some roads that are currently classified that we are recommending become local, so they would no longer be eligible for federal funding. But those are because those are residential roads. And at some point, maybe somebody thought they were going to expand. Most of them function as local residential. And there's very few that we're recommending be pulled off of a collector or arterial down to a local, but all of them are, you know, have got driveways. Some of them actually have cul-de-sacs. They just don't meet the criteria. But again, these are just our recommendations. We obviously can't have jurisdictions and tell them what their classification is going to be. So we want to work with each jurisdiction. Again, we're not asking to just go ahead and bulk approve this, but really because the process is going to be rather intensive, we wanted to bring this to TAC and just get approval to go through this process and work with each jurisdiction to look at just these roads in the MPO, especially with TIP coming up, and make certain that they see our suggestions of, again, what should be added in a few cases, maybe removed from the federal system, and also see if there's other roadways that they're expecting in the future, or that they maybe would apply for TIP funds that aren't currently eligible, that we've got those roadways included.
And I'll add that a possible downside, it's not likely to impact you too much, is typically if you're like a principal arterial, there are more requirements that come with those as far as federal highway is concerned. And so, but typically those requirements are on interstates. So, and that's where it impacts CDOT. So I can't remember the exact requirements for principal arterials at the moment, but sometimes it requires certain types of signage every so often, and lighting type of things. But just keep that in mind, that sometimes when you get to the higher classifications, that there are more requirements if you're under the federal system.
Well, let me ask you this too, Will, Catherine. Assuming that other MPOs throughout the state are going to be going through a similar system of upgrading and evaluating some of their local roads and seeing if they are then to be upgraded, wouldn't that potentially, let's say that PPACG said no to all of this, right? And then all the other MPOs did it. Wouldn't that could affect our percentage of funding for federal dollars, because the lane miles would have increased in the other MPOs and ours would have stayed the same? So, I mean, we need to increase those lane miles with everybody else, I would think, statewide, to be consistent with trying to continue to get perhaps our fair share of federal roadway dollars.
I'll go ahead and jump in. This is actually probably a perfect question for John, because he'd probably know better than me, but sometimes those lane miles do get counted into certain formulas that distribute funding. So it's possible it might impact it. It might be, very minimal though, but that's something I can ask John and see what he has to say about that. He's been doing it longer.
I'm going to follow up with that, because Dole, that was a great question and not one that I had thought of. What I was thinking of is, I'm wondering if changing a road from like a major collector to a local, does it impact the HUTF revenues?
No, the what you submit for WebHut is still based on your ownership. It will, however, you'll see it updated in your WebHut once this goes through. So whether it goes to a local or from a local up to a major collector or an arterial, those factors, if it's approved by the FHWA, then kind of submitted back to CDOT, and then CDOT system will be updated. So next year when you file, you'll notice the change, but it doesn't actually change the mileage credit that you get.
So you don't get more money for a principal arterial than a local road?
Trying to think back, it's been a long time since I had to do WebHut, but my understanding working with CDOT to submit it was that it's based on your overall mileage and factored out that way.
Can we just verify both of those, Dole's questions and mine? Because that would certainly, that could hit our pocketbooks. So let's just make sure so that we know what we're getting into.
I've written those down and I will check with John. And
yeah. And I know, Catherine, because you and I had just emailed about this, and I know specifically to Manitou, we would love to see, and I haven't quite jumped into your data yet there, Will, but I would love to see some of our roads get upgraded, because we could really benefit from having some federal dollars help, do some work on some of those roadways. So I know from our small local perspective, we're very much in favor of this.
Yeah, understood. And I think that's how it's going to be for most jurisdictions, really. But that's why we said we've got recommendations, but this isn't going to be again, we're not asking for approval just to go ahead and take care of all 246 of this, but rather to approve the process so that we can meet with each jurisdiction, Manitou, Fountain, El Paso County. We've already gone through this with Monument. That's why they're next on the action item list. But review it together, make changes based on the recommendations and what the jurisdiction recommends, and put together a packet and get it submitted to the FHWA.
Okay.
And like I said, it could be a very iterative process. Right now, we're just to try and keep it in bite-sized increments, so to speak, looking at just the MPO. And then there's going to be some roadways outside the MPO, especially for El Paso County, that we want to look at as well.
Well, can we just give you the tentative nod? Keep going. Keep us in the loop.
Well, so Tim, I'm sorry, though, I got one more question before
Sure,
we do that. So these are you're showing design criteria. So let's say that you're adding a functional class to monument, as we're about to do. Does that roadway need to meet that criteria that's now outlined on your functional class? You got the next, I don't know which side it is, but it shows functional class design criteria. Does that road now have to meet the MPO requirements on that functional class?
No, those are, I think if you're looking at the CDOT slides, is that right?
No, it's us here. It's slide, I can tell you, it's slide 12 of your presentation.
Okay, yeah. It does not have to, no, those aren't requirements. Those are just the guidelines that CDOT gave for trying to identify its function within a network and possible design criteria.
Okay, so these are not design requirements.
They are not requirements. They are simply guidelines.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County. I guess, Catherine, I think it would also be good. I believe this also affects whether these roads are eligible for emergency relief funding through federal highways. So it would be good to make sure that everybody's clear on that and verify that as well. Thank you.
I will add that to my list. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Hey, this is Aaron Busto. Can I chime in for a sec?
Yes, Aaron, please.
Thank you. So yeah, this is a very fun, very complicated process, but it's pretty straightforward in its purpose. I wanted to go back to one thing that was talked about early on and just make sure it's clarified that any local or municipal functional classification, unless it's aligned with the federal highways classification, is only for local purposes. So we run into this situation a lot where a local agency will consider one of their roads this, but our database says this, and that's what we have to follow. So I just want to bring forth that there are sometimes two different sets of functional classification, and it's really important to know what's what. Our functional classification isn't always as useful for local jurisdictions as their own would be, but it is very important the distinction is made that for federal purposes, the federal highways record is the one of import.
So Aaron, you're just confirming the fact it's important for us to have this data updated and accurate.
Yes. So yes.
Yes.
With the federal log, which CDOT has, and you can check Otis, they have that updated to include all of the functional classifications. And just to throw out one more thing, a designation on a national highway network or national highway system or STRANet is a different process than this. This does not include the NHS or STRANet designations.
Okay.
Nor the critical urban, critical rural freight corridors or the national freight network. You know, they all go together, but this is something else.
Thank you, Aaron. Any other comments for Will or Catherine?
So Will, I think I heard you mention you're going to get with El Paso County. You already got with Monument. Is this kind of similar what you gave to me a year and a half ago to like, you gave me like some maps to look at. Was this similar?
Yes.
Is this the same? Yes, okay. Do you have
Um,
updated maps?
Actually, yeah, and so it's online. That link that goes to the web map, we've got our center lines that we use. In addition to what we recommend, we also have the center lines for all 3 counties within the COG broken down by federal functional class. And there's another field in there, Tim, that might be helpful to you that also shows it's another field called local functional class. And that's where we use, like, for example, Teller County has some of similar to what you guys are doing. They've got their own classes. And just like Aaron was referencing, Colorado Springs has their own kind of functional class setup that's got a couple of extra. I think you guys have like 11 different possible classes. So we do have that data recorded where we can get it from each jurisdiction. So that way it's kind of easy for jurisdictions to compare. So when we meet with each municipality or each county, that's the data that we can go over and say, your designers or planners are calling this an arterial, they're calling this a collector, but federally it's considered a local. Maybe we should look at adding that to the list and doing an upgrade. That's the kind of conversations that we can have in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
So this is Victoria. I thank you for having gone through this. I think it's a terrific process. It's absolutely essential. We have not done this in the 12 years that I have been with PPACG. So it's great that you're going through this. I'm also very excited about your map that I've been really looking into. It's very, very useful. There is a way to click on and make the jurisdictions pop out so you can focus on your own. And I have already found some roads that I cannot believe are not on this system already. So I am continuing to go through that, and that mapping tool is very handy. So good job, Will.
Thank you. And again, we're not trying to make this the first and final stop. We understand that this might just be the first process and that we're going to have multiple submissions later on, because really we consider this, like I said, the low hanging fruit. But like you mentioned, Victoria, looking through El Paso County and especially Colorado Springs, there's a lot of roads that are considered local that by all criteria and guidelines should probably be federally classified. There's a lot of roads that could be updated beyond the 246 that we've identified just in this initial batch.
And with that, I will go ahead and move approval that we approve the process to update federal highway functional classifications.
This is Sally. I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. We'll continue on. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
I think we can all support and encourage and help as much as we can, because I think it just is a win-win all the way around. So thank you.
Yeah, feel free to reach out and contact me if you guys do have any of the follow-up questions. I'll be reaching out to each jurisdiction as well, just to schedule time with planners if I know the contact. And if not, I'll probably be reaching out to some of you to maybe guide me to the correct contact again, so I know who to sit down with, and we can go over this and start putting together a packet of recommended improvements and upgrades to these FHWA classes.
And to like Victoria's question, perhaps I don't know what your data looks like if you have it broken out by municipality or not, but it would be interesting to know the roads that were close, like to Victoria's point, and then to know why perhaps they didn't quite qualify. And then that could give us as the locals time to look into that data perhaps and see if it's the data you have we agree with or whatever the case may be. So
I do have it broken out by municipality on an Excel spreadsheet. That was an attachment to the meeting materials. I believe there's a link
okay,
to download that Excel.
we can click on that first
SharePoint.
and get back to you then. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also on the map that he has online, there's a base map at the top left-hand side. You can click on that and it allows you to select jurisdictions, and it will put different colored blocks for the jurisdiction so you can focus on your own area. As I've been playing with this, I've learned it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay. I was following along, so let me get back to my agenda here. Okay, so I think, Catherine, we're going to talk about monument now and basically the same topic or similar topic.
Yes, yes. So we actually did start the process with Monument because they had a specific request for a roadway that they'd like to change, that they wanted to use the stimulus funding on. And so that's why we wanted to move with move on with the process with Monument specifically. And they didn't have as many roadways that might need changing as well. So based on recommendations from Will's data analysis, and also kind of a review by Monument, there are 5 roadways that they want to update through this process. And so a couple months ago, we brought you a different monument project to update as well. And so we're going through that same process where they submit the request based on our recommendations, we kind of helped compile all that data, which will help you all with in this process as well if we move when we move forward on your jurisdiction. And we were able to help them with the mapping and that kind of thing as well to help make the process a little less painful for you all. So anyways, once we bring it through the MPO, then we submit it to CDOT and then they submit it to Federal Highway. So we're going to take it through that process. And these are the 5 roadways from Monument that they would like to request changes to. And all of them, except for the last one, are to go from a local to a functionally classified roadway. And then the final one is the Washington to Franklin, or Washington Street from Franklin to 2nd, going from a major collector down to a local road since it didn't really meet the criteria based on those things outlined by Will. And I won't go into too much more detail since Will did do a lot of the detailed outline as far as functional classification, but I'm happy to take any questions, and all the attachment outlines the request in detail.
I just have to say your cat is cracking me up.
He always wants to be right there when there's a meeting.
Likes to see himself on camera.
Yes.
So what do we need to do about this, Catherine?
So this will require a recommendation to the board to approve the recommended updates for the monument functional class.
Before we do that, are we thinking that each member agency will do their own report like this as we're able to, or are we anticipating kind of compiling them all and doing one recommendation to the board type thing?
That's actually something we were going to ask you. It kind of depends how the process moves. If for Monument, they obviously wanted to move quicker, so that's why we're bringing it separate. But if we want to do it all in one big packet, we can do it that way. And just keeping in mind that every single, section of roadway that we change, we have to include quite a bit of data with that. You can see that in the outline of the letter that and the spreadsheet table that's attached. And so we need to make sure that we include all that data and a map, and we have to have a signed letter from either the city council or the county commissioners or whoever or town manager, whoever you guys are required to have signed things like that, saying that it's approved on your end to move forward with these. So that process could take a while for some, and it might take, be quick for others. And like Victoria has a lot more roadways to look through than Manitou Springs. So it just depends on your time frame and what you all want to do. We can make it work.
So if I may then, let's say that this, the CAC approves this today. What is and then let's say the board approves it when they're supposed to approve it. How much time is needed? Because whoever mentioned it earlier, it would be good for those that want to make changes to have that in place when we do the next, tip rollout. Will this be incorporated into that system soon enough? I mean, do you have any idea how long that process takes?
Yeah, this last round that we did with Monument, because it was only, I think it was one roadway, it went really quickly. I think the longest part actually took getting it through our committees. So we had to take it through the 3 committees, get approved, and then we submitted to CDOT, and I think they submitted it to Federal Highway, and it was approved within the month. We can't guarantee that, depends on how busy they are, but it's not a huge process. But keep in mind that just because it becomes functionally classified and is eligible to be funded in the TIP doesn't mean that you can submit that roadway for funding in the TIP unless you submitted it in the long range plan. So you still have to be consistent with the long range plan and make sure that your projects are there. So it doesn't, supersede that process. We still need to make sure we're keeping consistent with that as well.
And then who did Will help the town of Monument create all of this then? I mean, was this a PPACG generated kind of document based on Manitou's request and need?
Yeah, for the main pieces, Will analyze the data and then help me create the spreadsheet of the data that was required that we needed to outline for CDOT to approve. And he also did the mapping. So yes, that data basically comes from the analysis that he did through this process.
Okay. I just think he could get overwhelmed with 246 requests or, 246 roadway upgrades.
Yeah. And I think for the most part, we already kind of have the data we need. Maybe we might need a few things here and there for you to fill out if we don't have that data. Correct me if I'm wrong, Will. I didn't really have to add much based on for the monument piece.
No, not at all. Yeah, and Dole, I appreciate the consideration that you have for just how much work this might put on our GIS staff. But actually, most of the legwork for this has already been done. So this analysis was something that we started actually several months ago when I started making updates to our GIS program, and then looking at where we've got some deficiencies and identifying we've got a lot of roads that really probably need to be functionally classified. And then the fact that it just happened to coincide with the census and FHW guidance to update it after the census just kind of put everything together to say we should start getting, working on this and making it happen. But most of the legwork for this really has already been done.
So I think the big piece that's left really is narrowing it down to what you all are okay with as far as changes. I think is the big lift, and then getting, approved through your processes as well.
Well, TAC, how do we want to slice and dice this? I mean, or slice and dice this. Do we want to? I mean, we can go ahead and make a decision on Monument, but I guess we'll have to decide on how we want to handle the rest of the jurisdictions.
Do you want us to decide that now, or do you want to just? What do you want to do?
It sounds like it really just sounds like it's just a matter of reviewing your specific data. Will's going to set up a time with us where you can reach out to him. Like Victoria suggested, she may ask about certain roadway segments and maybe provide new data, whatever the case may be. And then Will can modify his model and data for your specific area and then kind of compile it into what they've already done. And you can get your requests submitted through CDOT onto federal highways.
Can Will do all of us in the next month or maybe the next 2 months? I mean, it sounds like he's far enough along and he wants to get it over with. So Will, let us know how fast you can get us all done. I don't want everyone to come in individually because I think that's just going to take up TAC time. But if you can knock us all out in the next 2 months, does that work, Will?
It does. Really, I can easily have all of this done within a month. I think it's just going to depend on how long it takes really each jurisdiction to review it and then get somebody from that jurisdiction, council or whoever, to sign off on it and send it back to us, and then we can compile it all. And just like we did for Monument, once we have the jurisdiction approval and say, yeah, we agree, we want to do these, and while we're at it, add a couple of these roads on, and we'll give it our recommendation. Jurisdiction approves it. I'll put it all into a spreadsheet as Catherine needs for the FHWA form submission, and then get it to her to pass on for approval to TAC and then on to FHWA.
So Victoria, you're our longest lead item always. How long is it going to take you?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to do this in chunks because I am not gonna be ready in a month.
Yeah.
What about 2 months?
I don't know that I can even commit to 2 months.
Yeah.
Because in the grand scheme, that only gives me 6 weeks to look at hundreds of miles of roads and then get to the board and get a resolution through them and then to bring it back. So I think we're just gonna have to take this in chunks as we can. I mean, Manitou is gonna be able to move far more quickly than I will. And that's fine.
Yeah, Victoria, you're right. And I guess it also, I mean, if a jurisdiction said to Will, your data looks good, we're good to go, then that process could start for you quickly. If it takes people a while to get or have to review data, that's really where the critical path, I think, is.
Well, I would say see how much we can get done in 2 months. We already know the county's out. Tim, how long do you think it's gonna take you?
I was just looking at that spreadsheet. It's going to take a while because I see missing roads and things like that. It's going to take a while for me to look at our complete roadway database, match it up with this one, and resolve it. I'm at least 2 months.
Sally?
Given everything else, unless I can get somebody else to help me out.
I'll leave that between you and Gail.
Gail?
Sally, how long do you
Yeah.
think it'll take you?
I will need at least a month, maybe 2, just based on our workload.
Well, then maybe whoever thinks they can get it knocked out in the next 2 months, can we bring it back in 2 months? Because I think Dolan could probably get done. I can probably get done. Palmer Lake can probably get done. And then whoever just needs more time can take more time. But that way we're getting some of the chunks of these knocked out. That's my thought.
Yeah, I think so too, Brandy.
And we had kind of anticipated that not everybody would get it done in one shot. So that's why I mentioned earlier that this was kind of the low hanging fruit especially for like El Paso County and Colorado Springs. I mean, you guys have a massive network and this wasn't supposed to be the end all be all. So if you guys wanted to just get some approved and then continue to reevaluate and like add more on and then come back and do it again, in a couple of months, that's certainly a process that I can entertain easily.
Well, then good comment, because I have a question. Like I saw Mark Scheffel. Mark Scheffel's identified as a local road. How do I get that change? Like that probably needs to change right off the bat, right?
Yes.
Do we go ahead and do that now, and how do I get it changed? And that would be part of the TAC recommendation next month if we do something like that.
Right, and again, that's why we kind of wanted these 246. Again, we called the low hanging. We wanted to bring to you guys sooner rather than later, in case of, again, like tip submissions and potential projects that you guys want to make sure that you can secure eligibility for federal funding. Mark Scheffel being a fantastic example. Yeah. So if you knew that you guys wanted to go with some of that, and we can put it together and then get approval through council and put all that together quickly, understanding that we'll continue to review and then maybe make further submissions later on in the year. Again, that's a process that we anticipated, and that's something that we can easily accommodate on my end.
Okay. We'll circle the wagons in the city, figure this out.
And we'll follow up with you too. I'm looking at Manitou stuff and it looks like we're getting downgraded on most roadways. So someone really thought Manitou was going to grow and have a lot of traffic at one point. Okay, any other questions for Will? Let's go ahead and make a decision on the monument on our topic right now, specific to their recommended roadway reclassifications.
This is Victoria, I'll move approval.
This is Sally, I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? And what's your motion there? Victoria, did you make the motion, Victoria?
I did. I move approval of the change of functional classifications for monument as presented.
Okay. Thank you. Sally, you seconded.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, trying to keep things on schedule here. Next agenda item, Catherine, tip policies and procedure updates.
Yes, all right, so Catherine Winder, PPACG for official records. All right, so this item was brought to you last month for information and a few months back as well, so you've seen this a few times. And this is for tip policies and procedure updates. This is to add to the document the bulleted points below in pages 11 and 12 that outlines pretty much what PPACG is going to do to try and help keep projects moving and make sure that we can try and obligate our funds in the time that they're listed on the tip. And so that no changes have been made since you saw it last month. We didn't receive any additional changes, recommendations, so nothing has changed there. So with that, this is a requested action item for recommended to the board. I can take any questions if you have any.
Would anyone
All right.
like, thank
I was
you.
gonna say, nobody's jumping in, so I'll just move approval.
Do we have a second?
This is Brian. I'll second.
Thank you, Brian, Victoria. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion or comments? Okay, all those in favor of approving the tip policies and procedures, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. Sally, we're going to assume you said
I said aye.
yes. I saw that your mute came off right after you said aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Catherine, thank you. And then it looks like you have another one.
Yes.
Our future tip
Yes.
draft.
So this is our, again, last month we brought to you this draft of the FY 22 through 25 tip. And just as a quick reminder, we're going to be adopting 2 tips back to back so that we can get in alignment with the CDOT STIP. And so this one is for FY 22 through 25, and we're going to be bringing forward 22, 23, and 24 projects from the current tip and putting those in this one. And then we'll be adding year 25 onto this, but just for CDOT projects at the moment. And then, as you all know, we're going to be doing a call for projects for the future, for the out years for the next tip starting in May. And so this is for the draft document for that 22 through 25. And we didn't receive any additional comments from you or TAC. We did receive initial comments from the board regarding to just how the projects are listed on the TIP website. And so I updated that to better make that more user-friendly and easier to identify what projects are located in which jurisdiction. And so that's been updated, but no projects have been changed or anything. It's just the way that they were presented on the website. With that, this is a request to recommend to the board that this draft gets released to the public for that 30-day public comment period. And so once that period, the comment period closes, I'll bring it back to you all with any comments that were received from the public and potentially any changes that we might need to make. And you'll have another month to look over that before final recommended adoption in July. And then the proposed final adoption would be August for this tip. So I can take any questions if you have any.
This is Brian. I'd like to move that we recommend the PPACG Board of Directors release the FY 22 to 25 tip for public view.
Okay, do we have a second?
This is Sally. I'll second Brian's motion.
Thank you, Sally. We have a motion and a second on the table. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, all those in favor of, and Brian, I won't be able to repeat your motion, but of approving Brian's motion, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. Thank you. Brian's motion passes.
Thanks, Catherine.
Okay. All right. That's the end of our action items. So are there any other comment, any of that? I think we've discussed that thoroughly. CDOT, do you have an update for us or anything you would like to discuss or share?
This is Kathleen Collins. I do have a couple updates and then I'll defer to others. But first of all, related to greenhouse gas rulemaking, the transportation rulemaking for the entire state, there is going to be a Region 2 meeting on the subject on April 23rd at 11:30 a.m. to for 1, I believe. I'll have to double check that if that's wrong, but I believe it's 11:30 to 1, but I will see about that. And then also CDOT is starting to transition to in-person meetings. The idea is that potentially we will have an in-person version of a stack meeting in June. We're going to prep ourselves and hope our AV works for these meetings because that's been problematic in the past, but we're going to try and nail down that before we have a formal meeting. Also, Transportation Commission members, 3 of them are terming out of their service. And the 3, one of them is from your area, Commissioner Tebow. And then Commissioners Gifford and Zink are also going to be finishing their terms serving on the Transportation Commission. Those are the only updates I have. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
Anyone else from CDOT that would like to offer an update?
Don't have anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, thank you. FHWA updates.
Hi. I don't have any updates. Thank you.
That's a good update. Okay, moving on to Wendy Patterson. Safety plan and performance targets. Catherine, are you going to help lead that as well?
Yes, I'm gonna, hopefully Wendy's still on the line. I misjudged how much time we were gonna make her wait. I'm sorry about that, Wendy.
Okay.
It looks like you're still on, so great. So I'll let you go ahead and get started and then I'll follow up behind you.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wendy Patterson. I'm the Operations Administrator for Mountain Metropolitan Transit, and I'm here today to give a quick overview of MMT's safety plan. Next slide, please.
And Wendy, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but I've just been called upstairs to a meeting, so I need to sign off. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Sally.
Hi, Sally.
Okay.
So just
Actually, before you get going, Gail's going to step in for me too. I have to step away. So.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Sorry, Wendy.
That's okay, Tim.
I brought popcorn too. I'm sorry.
I think you're doing this, so that's okay.
Yeah. See you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
So some background on the plan. In early 2020, the FTA set a new mandate requiring all transit agencies to develop and publish an agency safety plan. MMT, we outsource 90% of our operational services. So as a requirement of our contracts, we usually have some sort of mechanism in place that they have a safety plan and that they follow that. So we were kind of in a good position already in terms of this new FTA mandate. But one piece that we were kind of missing was, as a oversight agency, we needed to put a little more monitoring in place to make sure that our contractors were following their safety management system plans. Next slide, please. So some of the safety plan general requirements is, again, we were supposed to adopt the plan by December 31st, and we submitted ours and had it approved in November of 2020. So we were in good shape there. The plan must be reviewed on an annual basis. So we look to do that every July, and any changes that we make in the plan must be approved by MMT's executive director and also city council. MMT, we must ensure that the safety management system plan of our contractors have performance targets in place and have been identified and that they're being followed. And also one of the new requirements that we had were to identify a chief safety officer that is a direct report to the executive director and who will ensure necessary processes and procedures are in place for our contracts. Next slide. So the 5 plan key areas of emphasis that we have are, the first one is to develop safety performance standards. And those for us are been identified as fatalities, accidents, injuries, safety events, and also system reliability, which is road calls. The second piece of that is to develop a safety management policy. So internally, what we've done here is we've developed a safety committee made up of MMT staff and also our contractor staff that meet monthly, and we've been doing that since early November. This committee, we review all types of things, but predominantly our agenda consists of reviewing past months' incidents and accidents via cameras. We collect that information on board our equipment. So we've been looking at that and then discussing preventative measures, retraining opportunities. We've developed some training material, and also we allow our operators to provide us feedback on areas of concern to allow us to create policies and procedures for our overall operation. The third component is to develop a safety risk management. And so the safety committee, we've developed trend analysis where we review heat maps of accidents and incidents that happen while our vehicles are out on route. And so what we've done is we work with the operators for specific locations of concern that they may have. And as an example, we've already been able to identify multiple intersections that have been notorious for us over the past years for POVs rear-ending us. One example is Academy in Montebello. Just insurance claims alone over a 5-year period were over $200,000. So we've worked with our traffic engineering department, and they've been able to, they created a sign for us to kind of alert POVs that our buses are at a stop, and we look to kind of monitor that. Hopefully that improves. And if not, traffic engineering is going to help us solution something different in certain areas, but maybe the sign will work for us. So the fourth one is safety assurance, and this area is identified to ensure our employees, our contract employees, the operators who drive our vehicles have a safe reporting environment in workplace with no retaliation. So we do this through, several options for those employees, developed anonymous mechanisms that we have set up in place, but we also allow our contractors, we've set up a site where they can contact the chief safety officer directly of any areas of concern for their providers. And the fifth one is safety promotion. Safety is our #1 priority at MMT, so we continue to strive to promote safety while pursuing several areas of improvement in this area, not only for our operators, but our passengers. So we're looking at several different areas and making sure that all of this safety promotions, training, all of that is in place for our contractors as well as our MMT staff. And I think next slide. Here is an example just of our safety plan. It kind of shows you what we've done to develop our targeted information. Is we've taken 5 years worth of data in terms of accidents, injuries, that type of thing, and have come up with a number that we hope to meet or beat on an annual basis and see reduction over time in these areas. Am I still on, or?
Yes, you did cut
Okay.
out a little bit, but I
Okay,
think you're.
I saw it came up that my internet was spotty, so I think that is all I had.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it.
Sure.
And so I'm just going to follow up from that presentation to kind of relate it to why we're bringing this item to you. Obviously, safety and transit are important, but also as an MPO, we have a requirement to adopt their targets or adopt targets for transit safety as well. So that's why we're bringing this item to you today. So as an MPO, we're required to coordinate with the transit providers and the DOTs if needed to set performance targets and integrate those into our planning documents, like our long range plan and our TIP. And so this specifically, we have other targets that we've set for federal highway. This one's for the FTA's safety plan specifically. And so as the MPO, we can set our own targets, but we don't recommend that since we're not the agency that's actually implementing or making these decisions. So as PPACG staff does propose that we adopt the MMT targets and make updates to our already listed targets in our LRTP and our TIP as those things are amended. So once we adopt these targets and those documents need to be updated either through an amendment of the LRTP or the TIP, then we'll add those in there and just make sure that those are referenced in our document. And just kind of to how we tie those into our documents is by our project selection process and our project scoring criteria, which happens through the long range plan process that then flows into the TIP. And so the long range scoring criteria that most of you have experienced does incorporate a lot of transit pieces into it. And so that's how we tie targets, goals, and performance measures into our planning process. And this will just need to incorporate additional pieces of that as well. But Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but we already kind of do count for safety as far as transit safety as well for those scoring criteria.
Right.
Okay. So this would just be an information item this month, and I'll be bringing it back to you all next month for recommended adoption of those targets into our process. And if there's any questions.
Great job, Wendy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you,
Have a good
Catherine. Okay, Catherine, you're up again.
Whew, getting tired now. Okay.
Your cat did too.
Yeah. All right, so final one. All right, so this is, we brought this to you last month for information as well and provided opportunity for y'all to review and give feedback. We also had provided it to CDOT and our Federal Highway and FTA partners for feedback as well. This is for our 22 through 23 UPWP, our Unified Planning Work Program, for those of you that were there last month. And it just outlines the transportation planning activities and budgets and timeframes for completing the work through our Federal Highway Planning Program. And so that's PPACG staff essentially, and what we do to make sure that we're meeting the planning requirements that we have as an MPO. So we do make an update every 2 years, and this is the new document that would go into effect October 1, starting with the new federal fiscal year. And we did make some of the more significant changes outlined there, but I won't go into those again. I'll just outlined that we did get feedback from Federal Highway and FTA, and we've made updates to the document since then based on those recommendations. Nothing major, just making sure that we clearly identify and outline the processes and making sure that everything is available to the public. There are some other updates that are outlined on the second page of your memo for Federal Highway and FDA recommendations. So we did make those updates as well. This month it is again just another information item. So you see that we've made updates and you have a chance to make any more recommendations before next month when we bring it to you for a recommended approval as well. And I'm happy to take any questions this one.
Catherine, this is Kristen from FTA. Can you hear me? Okay.
Hi, yes, Kristen.
I just wanted to shout out and say thank you to you and your team for reaching out and discussing my comments. I really appreciate that. I think you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you. And we appreciate yours and Aaron's feedback on the document for making it better. So we appreciate that.
Hey, Catherine, this is Jennifer from El Paso County. I guess, and I haven't made my way through the entire document, but I'm sure we will. But I guess one thing I'm just really concerned about as a result of some of the state and federal legislation, and it's something that Victoria's been working on diligently, is just, some of the elevated requirements that we are likely facing for, some of these greenhouse gas statutory things that are coming through. So I guess I just want to make sure that, as a region, we're in a good position to be able to react to those. And so I guess we'll look through this, but that's one thing that I want to focus on and just make sure that, there's capacity to be able to address some of those things.
Yes, thank you. And that's something John specifically is definitely keeping an eye out for that. And we obviously want to make sure that we meet all of our federal regulations and requirements, which is the main point of this document. And so the state requirements will actually, obviously add a little bit more on top of that. So John is keeping an eye on that. And we haven't really outlined any of that in this document because it hasn't been finalized. But I imagine if it changes anything, we'll have to bring this to you all for an update, and there might be more discussion, but I will let John know that you made that comment as well, Jennifer.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. That's a really good point, and that could affect next month's presentation, I guess, and potential approval. Okay, I'm sorry, Catherine, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it might be a bit longer than that, just because the final rulemaking is, I don't think it's planned for any time too soon. So it might be, months down the road, but we'll see.
Okay, any other questions for Catherine? All right, member entity announcements. Floor is open. Whoever has any questions or comments would like to announce to the group. Okay. All right. Any items that we need to bring in for future TAC meetings?
I have some, but I won't bore you all with them unless you'd like me to.
I trust you to add them to the agenda, Catherine.
Okay. So if there's any others that anyone wants to add.
Okay, anything else before we adjourn this meeting? Okay. Let's get this thing adjourned.
Hey, one quick comment. Sorry, this is Will. Just to answer the question that Victoria brought up earlier. Yeah, HUTF funding does not consider functional classification. It really is primarily based on vehicle registrations and then lane miles that are owned, are open and maintained by each jurisdiction. And if anybody wants to see that, I've actually got the Colorado statute that breaks down how funding is allocated. I'll be happy to forward that on to anyone.
Thank you, Will.
Yep.
But that could mean, though, to Victoria's point, if any of those roads have been widened since then, it could still help it qualify for more lane miles potentially.
Yeah, so when you submit your web hut, that's one of the things you want to go through. And in fact, when I was working at Castle Rock, we got an extra just over 75 grand a year just by making updates to the web hut on roads that hadn't been updated. So I always encourage jurisdictions, when you do your HUTF, don't just add the newly built roads. Make sure you go back and add everything. Because if you've expanded that road, if you've added lanes to something that's been in the system for a while, then you're leaving money on the table by not updating everything.
Okay. Anything else? And I can't. Yes.
Hi, this is Mark Northrup with PPACG.
Hi, Mark.
Hi. I just wanted to fill you in that we just want to let you know that the City of Colorado Springs has formally submitted an amendment request to the RTP for the US 24 Patterson interchange project. Staff is beginning the process of reviewing the details of the project, and we'll soon be reaching out to you by email to see if there are any additional projects you'd like considered while we amend the plan. And then any additional projects will have an impact on the timeline for amending the plan. And then at a future TAC meeting, we'll discuss the revenue estimates and amendment timeline with you and seek your approval at the time. So I just wanted to fill you in on that. Thank you.
Okay, Mark, thank you. Okay, going once. All right, and I can't remember, Catherine, do we have to have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I think so.
Okay.
No, you don't.
Otherwise, we have to stay here all night.
Oh, we don't have to, Jessica. Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's consider this meeting adjourned. Everyone enjoy your afternoon, and thanks for your contribution and for being involved.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.